40. Tomorrow's 6 weeks since surgery, so I'm getting to the point where I can actually do stuff
Anywhere
after
or you
this
have
week.
some-
We're just back here somewhere.
Okay.
Somewhere here.
Here.
Yeah.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Okay.
And
Welcome.
Yes, thank you.
So, I'm Melissa Jenkins. I'm the Vice Chair of the Animal Welfare Advisory Committee. I'm the Operations Director at Operation Catnip.
Great.
Our chair is out today, so I'm gonna lead this to the best of my ability. Do I have to call something to order?
Yeah, the agenda is
Yes.
on there.
Okay. So, perfect. Okay. So, I'm calling this meeting to order.
You're doing a great job.
Thank you. We're going to start with public comment. It's 3 minutes uninterrupted. Nothing today? Okay. Seeing no other members of the public here, we can proceed to approval of the agenda. Do I have a motion to approve the agenda?
I mean, 1 second. You actually cannot do any business because you don't have a quorum.
I think they might actually have a quorum. I've spoken with Courtney,
good.
and I've spoken with May, but I want to make
Okay.
sure, I know we have a vacancy.
Oh, okay.
How many people are, I just want to make sure, how many people are supposed, not including the alternate, how many people are supposed to be on WAWAC?
Not counting the vacancy, not counting the alternate, it is supposed to be 6.
But
Counting the vacancy, it would be 7.
7, so because you're supposed to have an odd number, so it should be 7 plus 1 alternate, right?
Correct.
But we have a vacancy,
Correct.
so we're at 6.
Correct.
So you have a quorum.
Okay.
I did clear it with Courtney.
Okay.
She asked me to look, and I looked, and
Okay.
so that's what I needed to get the numbers, and so you do have a quorum.
Okay, great. All right, so I move to approve the agenda.
Second. Okay, the agenda is approved. Let's meet the director candidate.
Why don't we introduce ourselves?
Yeah.
That'd be great, thank
A
you.
little bit weird here. My name is Chelsea Bauer. I'm the Executive Director of the Humane Society of North Central Florida. We're about 5 minutes from the shelter. We work pretty closely with you guys. And I've been in this role for 4 years now, but I've been with Humane Society for almost 12, so that's about it. Your turn.
Oh, pardon me, Jennifer Webb. I'm Executive Director of Shakespeare Animal Fund. We're a new organization in town. In 22 years in Nevada, we pay emergency veterinary bills for elderly, disabled, anybody who can't afford it, and as a suffering or dying pet.
My name is Kristen Young. I'm the Executive Director of the Wagmore Foundation. We're a local funder. We provide grants and loans to area animal organizations and non-animal organizations, but for the focus here. And I think grants have been going on. Well, I've been working there for 7 years, but the grants have gone 20 plus years.
Oh.
So, yeah.
Nice to meet everyone.
Would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. Do you want me to go over my background, or do we have to stick
Did you
to?
introduce yourself?
I did.
Oh, okay. I missed. Yes. Go ahead.
Great. So my name is Meredith McLean. I am currently the Division Director at Collier County Domestic Animal Services. That's in Naples, 4 hours south of here. It is an animal shelter that roughly takes in 7,000 animals a year. So I'll just sort of review my animal welfare background. I started with animals, loved animals growing up, of course. Started as a veterinary technician, sort of just fell into that world. While I was a veterinary technician, I had visited a farm animal sanctuary in upstate New York and sort of just kept along on what they were doing and jobs that were available. And as soon as a job opened up there, I moved up there as their visitor program manager. So did a lot of education. I was in charge of their tour program, their bed and breakfast, as well as events and outreach. So a little bit of fundraising experience there. I had some family that was in Florida, plus New York sort of pushed me over the edge of the coldness that I did not want to live in anymore. And I had some family here. There was some need down here, so I moved to the Naples area. I actually applied to our local Humane Society just as a general position, and they didn't have anything open. So while I was sort of waiting for my position to open there, I spent some time with the YMCA just as a general manager, and then I moved to work for the Schultz Family Foundation, which is the founder of Best Buy. So spent some time there as a program manager, learned a lot about grants, what to do, what not to do. So that was a good experience moving on. Through my relationships within the community, I was in a lot of different groups as well as leadership programs. And at the time, the chair of the leadership program I was in was on the board of Humane Society Naples, and they really wanted to beef up their fundraising, specifically related to events. Naples is a very heavy event town. So I started there specifically doing events. There were 5 major events a year, and then, of course, any little community events that, fundraisers, things like that. And, a lot of fundraising in that world. When I first started, I wasn't specifically a development person, but, when you're doing events, you're looking for funders and corporate sponsors. And then my boss was leaving at the time, and the organization really wanted to put a lot more focus on shelter intervention programs, and there wasn't a specific department for that. So sort of worked out a plan with my CEO when she said, well, what do you want to do next? I sort of set it up to say, hey, what if we sort of break outreach and development? So we created a community service division. So I started out as a director there. Through that programming, I was able to start a mobile veterinary clinic, a pet food pantry, and temporary boarding. We also have a medical fund within the clinic that existed at Humane Society Naples. I didn't particularly oversee that, but through sort of our, what I would call a social work program, I was able to also help community members that needed to get a little bit more than our mobile vet clinic could start at that time. And then moved into the chief of that role as we were expanding. The Humane Society, just like you, partnered very closely with our local animal services. And unfortunately, at that time, it was not in the greatest position. So the county decided that they wanted to put a little bit more of a focus on our county shelter. And in that process, we're looking for a new director. I wanted to step up in my career, but I am wildly happy that I did it because I thought I had it hold on what animal care was like on the county side, but until you work it, you don't really know. So I did take that position. I am really grateful I did. I've learned so much working in a managed intake versus, open admissions. We are still technically managed admissions. You just never know what the day is going to look like, which is absolutely exciting to me, actually, although sometimes the chaos is a bit much. So in my time there, the live release rate, just to give you some statistics, the live release rate was 88%. It's now up to 96%. And that is primarily through a lot of good work with the team that we've done to really improve the facilities and the animal welfare there. So I think before people were not as willing to walk into the door. And now we have really good feedback that the shelter is a much more inviting place, which then, of course, leads to an increase in adoptions, wildly improved numbers with transfers out of the shelter. That's roughly improved by 60%, as well as, the numbers that you look at, such as like what was dying in care when I first started versus now and things like that. So really significant improvement in terms of the animal welfare within that organization. I did start that job with the understanding that at some point I was not going to be sticking around in Naples forever, so this opportunity presented itself. I spend a lot of time up here. I love the area, so when I got a phone call, I was very excited about it, and here we are. That was not short. I apologize.
No, that was great, very
Nice.
thorough.
Nice.
Do we want to go down and ask questions?
I'd love to ask.
Kristen, you want to start?
Yes. So you said that the county was facing a number of issues with the shelter and wanted to turn that around. Could you share some of those issues and also what you initially did when you got into the position to make the changes you mentioned?
Sure. I mean, I think there were a couple things. I think, capacity for care and what the shelter really had on hand versus what they were able to care for was over the limit all the time. And not really looking at how to exactly address those issues through outlets that existed. Unfortunately, like many organizations, we all know veterinary shortages are real. There was no veterinarian there that did surgery, so we also had a lot of animals that were out as what we called foster to adopt because we were still waiting spay and neuter. There was a lot of personnel things going on there. It wasn't terrible in terms of the life-saving. It just really needed to be brought up to what we would probably all consider where we want animal welfare to look now. The other thing is like the Humane Society was helping, but there wasn't much in terms of, getting out into the community and really bringing our partnerships with other organizations together. Clearly, I had sort of a hand up in that because I worked at the Humane Society. So when I went there, that relationship was easy to maintain. But, there were a lot of organizations. Collier County is a pretty big county that really needed a little bit more mending and coming together. So I'm very fortunate, and I will give a lot of credit to the county that they actually got in before I got there. And they did a lot of investment into the buildings and training and, bringing in more staff. That was really a critical piece of what that organization needed. They did that through temporary staffing. So they sort of did set the stage for success because they recognized how important it was. So some of the bigger things I sort of worked on initially were definitely community partnerships. I like to say, Heather's probably tired of me hearing it, but everybody is playing very nicely in the sandbox together. We can all call each other if we need something, and for me, that's really important because I don't believe this work can be done in a silo. I really think we all need to work together. Actually, so much now that we're actually looking at how we can each sort of take a piece of the puzzle. So like, who wants to focus on TNR and who wants to really focus on shelter intervention, and then how can we support each other so we're not doing a little bit of the same thing, that we can really try to make a dent in our community in some of the areas that really need it. The other thing was morale, right? Like this work is not easy. And a lot of the staff had sort of gotten into the process of, like this is the work I do, and it's hard a lot of the days, and sort of, what does that look like when somebody walks in the door? Like, I want a friendly face that's going to greet you when you walk in the door. So really spending some time with the staff to bring the morale up, but really I think a lot of that is driven by really clear processes and who owns what and who makes decisions. So that's something that we really worked on to be able to give staff a little bit more clarity versus like, I have to do everything all day. You know what I mean? Like, I need you here, then I need you here. And it still happens. It's not perfect. And then sort of looking at what the organization needed as a whole from an organizational chart. So we were able to hire a high volume, high quality, absolutely amazing vet in the process. There was a vet there. That vet had left, so we had brought this one on board. But looking at staffing, what we really needed. So additional staffing in terms of temp staffing, but roles that were necessary. So in the time I was there, we were able to convert some existing positions that we didn't necessarily need to a foster coordinator, a volunteer coordinator, and a behavior and enrichment specialist. We have a pretty large dog population, so I wanted to make sure that, the sort of five freedoms, those were being met every day. And we have an amazing group of volunteers that really helps us. I say staff, but the volunteers are a big part of the work that we do, as well as reorganizing sort of what our animal care staff look like versus our front desk, because our animal care staff were doing both cleaning and front desk duties, which really prevented from more staff being out with the animals every day. So we worked with the board to get additional positions that were solely dedicated to the front desk. That actually took a while, and then the hiring process. So we're actually just in the process of training 3 new positions there. So once that's actually fully on board, all of our animal care will solely be dedicated to animal care, which is really amazing. And then with the veterinarian being hired, putting in SOPs for protocols for URI and Panluke and things like that, so that the animals were getting treated more quickly through the veterinary technicians and things like that. Our died-in care number has decreased by 62% with I give that most credit to the vet because, she created the protocols and we worked with staff to put those in. But neonate care was a big piece too. We had that would be the majority of animals that were dying in our care. So we had some creative programming that has now expanded. But really our foster coordinator has done a really great job getting out. So that position was really critical to me because we can do what we can in the shelter for neonates, but they don't need to be there. They need to be out. So really having the foster coordinator, but having a vet who supports our fosters was a big piece of that work being really successful. Our vet really loves neonates, so that doesn't hurt either. Sorry, there's one more piece I wanted to touch on, but we'll start with that for now. It'll probably loop back around somewhere.
You touched on what would be my next question would be management, because this is, I think, directors are more of a people role than animal role. We think of it because you're managing people who are taking care of the animals. So can you just elaborate a little bit more on your management experience, and then how did you turn morale around with employees?
Sure. So, I mean, just to my management style, I always tell staff, especially when we're having hard conversations, that I am not a person who got to where I am today because I was just amazing from the start. I had a lot of critical conversations early on in my career, and I'm really grateful for those. So I'm a leader that really does like to lead by example. So I do think a lot of my time initially when I was here would be spent with the staff on the floor to kind of observe and see, but also gather feedback from them, because I do find that staff really does have good ideas when things maybe aren't exactly where they need to be, and I want to hear that firsthand. I don't have all the answers. I do trust our staff and would like them to provide them the opportunity to be able to, work on making those decisions. But I do believe really coming through with constructive feedback, which is at times hard. But I also believe that if staff doesn't know what they should be held accountable for, then that's on me. That's not on them. So really just communicating and holding staff accountable. But I don't know where anything is currently at in terms of processes and procedures, but really critically looking at those to see if the staff truly does know what they should be doing, but also are we at the standard that we should be doing them at. So I think my leadership style is really working and providing honest feedback, but then also teaching those that are the managers to be able to provide that feedback as well. Because a lot of that is training, right? Like you don't just, some people are naturally good at it. Some people need a little bit more training. So, that's sort of where I stand. There was a second part of that question. Morale. Thank you. I think I touched on it a little bit. I mean, one thing I saw, like when I first started at Collier County versus like when I worked at the Humane Society, is there wasn't a lot of like celebration in terms of like the good things, right? You have to do a lot of the bad things, and you got to pick up poop, and you got to scrub kennels, and then somebody's screaming at you at the front lobby because you won't take their animal. But really celebrating the small wins is where we started. I don't say like morale is fixed by pizza parties and fun things. That certainly helps. But really celebrating. So like, our volunteers would always come up front when a dog was leaving that had been there for a while, and staff never joined them. So every time that would happen, I would call staff and be like, please come up front. The other thing is I started providing the numbers to staff every month, which I think unless you know what's really happening, that's something that you're just like, wow, we took in 600 animals last month and we were able to provide live outcomes for X amount. Like, I think sometimes we forget that, staff that's just scrubbing kennels doesn't necessarily always get to see that, and I see it up here. So bringing it down to that level so they really could truly see the impact that they were making. And then just sort of forming different areas, like when conversations were happening. Again, I don't think animal welfare works in silos, and I don't think a good leader works in silos. So, bringing in the right people to the right conversation. I also think getting those positions and sort of separating out who's doing what. So programming's operation and administration really made a big difference because everybody was doing a little bit of everything. And I find that if that's the case, we're not doing it well. So providing the extra support really did make a difference in the morale. But frankly, I think it comes down to also having an understanding of what your job really is every day. And that's forever changing. I'm not saying we perfected that, but I do think that, that was a little bit more focused. We also brought in quite a few people that have spent a lot of time in animal welfare. So they were also, beneficial in providing the team some feedback, but also like, hey, I've done this way for 10 years. How about we try it this way? So I think bringing in other people who understand the industry really made a difference there. And we have some really strong staff for sure.
And then my last question is, this position I think is unique in local government in that it's very public facing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's the tax collector and the property appraiser, but very few people go there, and it's not around a very passionate issue as pets.
Sure.
So the public's going to know your name.
Yes, they are.
And I read some of the news articles, and Collin County's not no different than we are in a lot of aspects. So, how would you respond to the passionate members of the public, and also public are also your volunteers? So can you share about your volunteer program and the challenges and opportunities that
Sure.
you've experienced?
Yep. So just in terms of the public and really volunteers or anybody who supports the organization, it doesn't necessarily mean it's somebody who adopts or volunteers, is for me, I found that what was happening, and again, to the leadership that was helping out before me, is there were so many things that were held back. And I do think that at times, sure, we're not putting everything out on the table, but transparency is really key in what happens in this industry. I'll be honest, I'm never going to get everybody on the same page. I think we all know that here. We're not always going to agree on euthanasia. We're not always going to agree on certain things and processes and procedures. But I do think being transparent and having a clear understanding of what those processes are really critical, especially here. I did my research for sure, are really critical in helping the public understand. And I do think that trust is going to take a while to build back, but I do think that's the process through. I had a lot of open door policy for quite a long time when I first started because volunteers wanted to talk to me, public wanted to talk to me, which is good because I think there's two things. I think I always want to provide an avenue just specific to volunteers that if there are concerns, I want them to be able to do that. But the balance is we also have to follow what our processes are as an organization, and staff sort of has the authority on that one. But that doesn't mean I'm going to just wash things because the reality are volunteers are the lifeblood of an organization and they're going to see more than I do on a daily basis. They have the opportunity to spend more time with the animals, things like that. So our volunteer population was absolutely amazing when I came in. Definitely there was some struggling points because there were a lot new processes that we wanted to put into place. We're still working on getting a new volunteer manual, more specific with dogs. There's not a lot of training done with dogs, which worked for years, but the reality is we do need to have very specific training to dogs. So we put in a leveling program, training for those levelings in dogs, which got a lot of pushback because it's like, well, I've been walking dogs forever and nothing happened. Why are we putting these processes into place? And the new volunteers coming in don't know any different, but the volunteers that have been there for 20 years doing that, some of them are there 4 or 5 hours a day, and it's hard to be like, well, this is the new process now. But again, I think if we sort of make it fair for everybody, then that's how we solve that. But some of the other challenges are just, what really is like a volunteer responsibility versus a staff responsibility. But one of the biggest things I could feel when I came in is there wasn't really, I wouldn't say there was no appreciation for the volunteers, but I think staff didn't always make an effort. And I also feel like staff felt like at times they sort of held themselves back because they felt maybe they were going to get asked a question that they didn't want to answer, they didn't know the answer to. So with volunteers, I have a program manager who oversees the volunteers who has built amazing volunteer programs. Like we work together to really explain the values of volunteers and sort of remember a good morning goes a long way. That's all a volunteer needs sometimes. But also the ability that if you don't know an answer, you can say that. So I think it was really building the relationship back with the volunteers and making it's not an us and them game. We're all in this together. So that has made a world of difference. And now I see staff and volunteers talking to each other all the time, which is like, it's absolutely amazing and beautiful. But also providing volunteers a lot of opportunities that they weren't able to do before. So we opened access to quite a bit of the shelter. There are some areas that are still off limit depending on like cruelty cases and staff only animals. But for the most part, volunteers are welcome anywhere. And if they can't, I have no hesitation showing them. And I think they just want to be listened to a lot of the time. So, volunteers for me being transparent. We also started quarterly meetings. We do surveys quite frequently to see sort of if we've elevated some of the things that were the concerns from the beginning. But I mean, I'll be honest, sometimes it does boil down to a frank conversation where this is a decision made by the organization and not a volunteer. But I think when they know, I always use euthanasia as sort of the example because it is a matter of contention a lot of times. We have a very set, clear SOP that is understood, and then that is also educated when a volunteer comes on board that euthanasia is part of this organization and this is how we make our decisions. That opens a world. I always tell everybody, you don't have to agree with me. You can be upset about it, but you also are a representation of this organization. So making sure that that is sort of met as well. As for the member of the public, I'll tell you, we had a lot of people going into board meetings before and after I started. Many of those people had actually never walked through the shelter. Frankly, bringing them into the shelter and actually seeing the work that's done on the daily basis made a world of difference. I'm never not going to explain something to somebody. Sounds like the simple answer, but I will tell you those people still generally go to the commissioners' meetings, but their tone is very different and way more supportive of the shelter. And I can see it on, the Facebook pages that say like, hey, this actually is happening and this is how you do it. So I think you sort of have to turn those that are maybe fully not understanding of what's going on at the shelter and bring them in and show them and support them and answer their questions as much as you can. And I have seen a big difference. I also think we have been able to clear our image with those partnerships within the community as well. I always give the example of, we had to close our shelter doors because we had a pretty significant outbreak with our cats back in June, and our partner organizations posted in support of that. So I think you build that goodwill with the community, but when you have your partners standing by you, and they can also see the numbers and the work that you're doing, that's when you really start to change the perception of what your shelter's doing. I hope that answered everything. Sorry.
Yeah, it did.
I normally jot some notes, but.
No, that's great. Thank you so much.
Are we going down the line?
Yeah.
Okay. I'll probably just ask one question so everybody gets to answer if we move back.
Great.
Meredith, it's a pleasure to meet you.
Thank you.
Loved your answer on building morale. I think that's terrific, and it sounds like you're going to be a great listener to hear what's really going on in the staff and so on. So, first question, what will you plan to do as executive director in the first 100 days? What are your top priorities so far?
Yeah, so I always say I'm not going to walk in knowing exactly everything that should happen. I'm not in this community. I don't know exactly what this community needs. I do know from an animal welfare perspective that would be sort of my first tackle and make sure that, at least the daily care of animals are being met. I think what I really would do, like in the first 90 days is spend a lot of time with the staff. Really, like I'll go clean a kennel, right? Like I'm not above that to really see what the organization needs internally from an operational perspective. But with that, I would spend a lot of time in the community. I am the type of person that goes to community meetings. Like I want to be involved where I can, but really also spending time with the partners that exist within this community. That's something that I first did when I came into DAS, because we can't strengthen what we're doing already without those partners. And that's just not necessarily locally. We have built a really good transport program at DAS, and for me, that is one of the biggest ways that we're getting animals out of this community. I do think we need them here for the people who live here, but we all know intakes are increasing, so we really need to look at it and expand how do we move animals out of our shelter quickly, whether that be with local partners or that be out of state or somewhere to the northeast. So I really think what I would do is spend my time learning a lot more in the first 90 days and then bring forward some processes and strategic planning based on what the county is looking for in terms of what does the next year look like. Are we looking at 1 to 3 years? Because I know there's a lot of potential changes that could be happening in the next couple of years. But any true animal welfare issues I would be addressing immediately. I haven't spent enough time there to say I saw this or that. But I do think it's more about learning and understanding what the organization needs initially.
Thank you. I'll let others ask. I
Yeah,
have one
we can
quick-
loop
one quick
around.
question. Knowing that so often the shelter has a negative connotation with people, what are the smart things? I think you've kind of answered, but how do you plan to bring more people into the shelter to see all the amazing things that can be done? Just thinking of other places that I have noticed or been around.
Sure. I mean, I think some of it is really what is the feel when somebody walks in the door of Animal Resources, right? So I think really looking at, like the husbandry access, the customer service pieces of the organization, because I did find that, people had a very obscure view of what domestic animal services was like. It felt like in a Sarah McLachlan commercial, right? Nobody wants to walk into that. They
Or
think
the dog catcher, something
Yeah.
that's negative.
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of us are still facing that, and it's 2026. And that's a kill shelter. I think a lot of it is sort of what does the first experience look like when somebody walks into the shelter, and how do we improve that? But also, how do we start selling the good work that we're doing? Because I know there's good things, and I can tell you the adoption event that was posted this weekend, that was a feel good, and I think even if you knew all the stuff that's been discussed recently, if you didn't know that, I still think there's a group of people that don't want to walk into an animal shelter. So how do we improve the image as a whole? I think it's through good marketing. I think it's through good customer service. I think it's through, inviting community members in to see what the shelter looks like. I think I would provide some opportunity for, community with the director coffee, something like that. That's what I did with volunteers and community when I first started. But really being transparent about the good things we're being, but also the challenges, so that the community has an understanding, because I do think our community is our biggest advocate as well. So why not also talk about the challenges and how we can support the shelter itself?
So you're talking about marketing to tell the public that maybe doesn't even plan to come to the shelter all the good things that you're doing.
Right.
Can you give an example of how you did that where you were before?
Sure. I mean, I think about the fact that, this is something I like to do, just simple things, because simple things make a big impact. We always need towels, and we weren't putting calls out for towels. Why, I don't know. But, we did that. And there are people who are walking the shelter, and, Naples is a very snowbird community. So we sort of did it in a line with, snowbirds leaving or coming back. But, people walked in and said, I don't want an animal. I don't have them, but I always have extra towels. So that's engaging somebody to support the organization in a very simple way. They're not necessarily going to adopt, but they're going to provide us supplies that we need. So,
and walk in the door.
Yeah,
see
and
a
walk
more
in the door.
Positive environment. is
Yes.
what you're saying.
yeah. And they might walk in and say, hey, I walked in there and the lobby was super clean. Like that's feedback we get, which is interesting feedback, but first impressions make a big difference. But I think it's a lot of conversation and education too. And honestly, and to your point of the first 90 days, I do want some feedback from the community and how they feel about the organization, because I want to see the perspective as a whole, not just from staff and volunteers.
Okay, thank you.
What are the top programs that are important to you as a director? And regardless if they exist here, what do you think is important that a shelter offers the community?
Are we talking about like in terms of, shelter intervention type programs or just programs in general?
Whatever is important to you. You mentioned you brought up a lot of new, like the
Mhm.
shelter intervention programs. What do you think the shelter should provide to the community? What's most important to you?
Yeah, I mean, doing a lot of work in shelter intervention, I would tell you, I think we all know here, everybody here is involved in animals, is that we really have to look at where is the flow coming from and how do we stop the flow from the beginning. I don't think that's probably going to be the first thing I do when I walk in the door. I think that's more once, operations are a little bit more stabilized, then we start looking at what does that strategic planning look like and able to provide support to the community. But I also know there are good organizations in this community that are already doing it. So how do I sort of work with them to sort of expand what's being offered? I think from a shelter perspective, the volunteer program already exists, but I know that this shelter cannot run without volunteers. So really taking a look at that volunteer program and how do we get more people in the door. I don't know what those relationships look like now. Have people left? Will people come back? And really getting a dedicated person to sort of manage the volunteers, because I did find there was a volunteer manager, but they were doing a lot of things and not solely dedicated to the volunteers. Was once we brought in someone solely dedicated to it, not only were we able to provide better training when people onboarded, because when we had done the survey, communication and then having an understanding of what their role really was important. And I will say we did that survey again, and those numbers have increased significantly, less complaints about that one. So the volunteer program is training, understanding, but also communication is really key, because I think with transparency comes communication, right? So if there's somebody that's dedicated to putting out a weekly newsletter or updating kennel signage so volunteers have a better understanding, things like that, I think that's really critical, because if the shelter is already short-staffed, how do we help with the other things? And I think the volunteers are really critical, and I know we always refer to dogs, but we've got cats and lots of other opportunities at really making sure the animal welfare standards. So if you only have the operational capacity to get dogs out once a day, can volunteers help get out twice a day? So that is critical. And I will say our volunteers assist us to get dogs out 3 times a day in Collier County, which is really awesome. As well as play groups. Our volunteers actually came together to fund Dogs Playing for Life being at Collier County one summer, and then training staff. And now we have 3 staff members that are trained to do play groups. So volunteers provide a lot of support for the organization, and they are very important to me. Foster programming. When I came in, I probably went home every night and cried during cat season because we had kennels overflowing and kittens dying. So creating that foster program for me, and it wasn't like a lack of, it was really just education for neonates. We all know 4 weeks, right? We think they're eating, they're not eating. It was more of education. I don't think it was a lack of people caring. They just genuinely didn't have the pieces to know what to critically look for when neonates were failing. So the foster coordinator put a really big a dent, and that foster programming for me is really, really important, because our shelter only has so much capacity. So what do we do when we're at capacity? We call in fosters. And not only does that, help from a capacity standpoint, it helps from a budget standpoint, it helps from a goodwill standpoint. That may turn into adoption. It may turn into them advocating, hey, go do something with the shelter. And that could be super short term. It could be super long term. So the foster program for me is really valuable. It's also helped our dog population quite a bit. It's really helped us, if we maybe have an on the fence dog, let's put it in a home and let's see how it does in a home, and then sort of make decisions. So if we have to make a hard decision, at least we checked our boxes. But maybe we find that animal shows no behavior, and I'm not talking about crazy extreme behavior, but more maybe those that were just like, why hasn't this animal moved along? And I will tell you, we've moved more dogs through adoptions, through fosters, because once they see them in a home, it makes a huge, you guys know this. The last thing I will say, as a county shelter, and it was something I didn't really have a handle on, I took in animals at Humane Society, was really a really strong transport program. So that program has gone, I think it's roughly 40%. I wrote it down, but not in here. In the last year, it was a little bit heavier the year before. And I think that came through a couple different things. I think there was some relationships that were severed because we weren't always being super transparent about what we were sending out. So an organization would agree to take animals, and then they would be sicker than they were planning for. So then that held up their blocks. So for me, building a strong transport program specifically for county where you don't really have an understanding, you don't have a choice on what comes in and out of your doors, to get animals out of here a little bit quicker. It's the way to do it. Transport programs are really, really important to me. And then, of course, when I can get there to the shelter intervention programs, those I think are really critical. And I don't necessarily think the county has to do them. I shouldn't say that. I don't mean it like that, but like, how do we build it together with what exists, and how can we focus on like what we can handle versus somebody else can handle? But I do think shelter intervention programming is extremely critical to this work. But I want to look at that as an organization as a whole, what we have capacity for.
What is your approach to pathway planning? And
Love pathway.
Specifically, what does the process look like for an animal that enters the shelter in terms of documentation and efforts to provide a live outcome or justification for not a live outcome?
Yeah. So one of the pieces I forgot to touch on when we were talking about morale is, so there's two things we do every day. So there's a 5-minute meeting every morning, and that's generally to sort of dish out what your assignments are, when your break time are, but also that was sort of one of the feedback from the staff is like, we don't always understand what's going on everywhere. So those 5-minute meetings have made a world of difference. We can talk about dogs that maybe showed a behavior, or, hey, we have a tour coming in, or there's a big transport going out tomorrow. So those 5 minutes are critical, not necessarily for pathway planning, but then the second piece is there is a team that does do pathway planning every day. So we walk around the shelter, because what I was finding is like an animal was coming off stray hold and it wasn't being updated, and then a volunteer was coming in and interrupting the front desk from their work in order to print out a new kennel card. So we were sort of losing process just on the very easy things. So we would walk around and I'd say, okay, this one's off stray hold, like it needs a name, like we need to update it. So that's part of it. There's also discussion on who can go to rescue, when are transports happening. From a behavioral perspective, this one, we've seen some increase here. Can we look for a foster? So that team is pretty much our operations manager, our foster coordinator, not every day, but some days, and then our pet transport placement and our supervisors. So I think what really happened from that is not just necessarily pathway planning, it was more awareness on what are we dropping the ball on here? Because it's just very easy to get into the day-to-day work and realize like some of these other pieces were missing. But really all of those then translate into the programs that I was just talking about. But I do think having rounds every day, as much as people like, it's just like, we're on fire, how are we doing these? They're also critical to make sure we don't continually stay on fire. So I think pathway planning is part of it. I would say if we're talking about justification in terms of euthanasia, I think it goes back to, what does that process look like? Have we met all of our boxes? Have we put out pleas for animals that are appropriate? And then following through with that. But my goal would be, if we're talking because of space, that we use pathway planning to not get there. And I am very lucky that, our local Humane Society pulls over 1,000 animals a year, and they really focus on medical because they understand that those are the ones we sort of want to move out of the shelter before it expands. And that's a beautiful relationship. And I have that luxury, and I do say it's a luxury because I know that that's not reality for everywhere. To sort of say, I can call them and say like, hey, my ISO room is getting really full. Like, what do you have capacity for? But then also, rewarding that relationship as well when I have really good options. Like, it's not just like, hey, I need you to take 25 pitties. Like, we also have, this case, like, how do we work together on it? So I think it's a little bit of a balance of making sure that, the organizations that are supporting them where we can, we're also helping them as well. And through that, not with pathway planning, we've done a lot of things together as a community, which I really love, and I know I'll talk about it a lot, but I think it's really critical.
Great.
I think everybody asked all the questions.
That's it?
Yeah.
You guys are easy.
I think those are all the important things. I wanted to ask a little bit more about your behavior knowledge for dogs.
Yeah. I'm not a trained behaviorist. I think putting people in the right place for that position is critical. I think I have enough experience that I work with the team. Some of the way, just so you know how we do it, one, euthanasia is a group decision, so it's never solely one person. And it's not typically made because an animal looks at me the wrong way. There are very clear indicators. We don't do official behavior assessments when they first walk in the door because I don't think it's fair and valuable. Clearly, if there are significant signs of certain things, we have a lot of different processes for that. But the way that I sort of stay involved with that is we do an Animals of Concern meeting every week. We can convene if we need to before that. So I have awareness on sort of some of the behaviors that are happening. When I first started, was walking dogs every day. So I learned dog behavior pretty quickly. I've trained with DPFL on play groups. Don't ask me to run them, but I love them. I just am one of those people that's like, oh no, they're growling. Okay. I feel like you have to have a very good set skills for dogs, doing play group. But I think my knowledge just comes through my experience, and I don't always. I take the word of my staff, but generally dogs that we're considering for euthanasia, I generally have an eye on myself. So if somebody asks me about a behavior of a dog and I don't know who they are, that's a good thing. Those that are potentially going to be concerns, I invite myself pretty early just to make sure that, one, we're doing everything appropriately, but also that, we're protecting staff and volunteers in the community as well. So no official training, but I think through experience and hand-on training, we've been able to make those, but typically the people that are those people are at the table in terms of those decisions.
Do you have questions for us? And
I feel like I've questioned out people.
Yeah.
But
9 minutes.
Sure. I will say you all are community organizations. Like, what is the number one thing that you would want to see that you would feel like, all right, like we're having success here? It can be different for everybody too.
Definitely communication and transparency and accountability when something isn't going right. It doesn't get shoved under the rug. It gets addressed and fixed. But that's we have gone through phases where we've had really, really, really strong relationships with animal services, and we've gone through phases where we haven't. So we always come back to the table when there's a new director. So I'm pretty excited about hopefully working with you and getting our community back to where we need it to be.
I think just the welfare of the animals. I love what you did with volunteers 3 times a day that the dogs get out. So to me, I think what you can do with the health and the welfare of the animals sounds terrific. I'm curious, what are your fundraising, what's your fundraising background, or what kind of fundraising do you see for us?
Yeah, I think there's a couple things. There were some donation accounts established with DAS that we can take donations as an organization. They are restricted to specific areas. But really working, we have a couple local groups that really support us that are specific to DAS, and they help us in a couple different ways. Like they'll help me help with RTO fees if a person can't afford it. They'll pay for specialty surgeries for animals that for me really shouldn't be euthanized, because it's really just the difference of, a medical procedure. Our vet can do a lot of things, but, orthopedics are a specialty. Ideally, we work with a transport partner to try to get them out, but if we can do the surgery and then they're willing to take them, they have helped us with some funding there, which was really been amazing. We were able to get some adoption sort of perks. So we're working on a program where an animal is going to get additional heartworm prevention if they leave. We already cover heartworm treatment if they're positive, but sort of long-term stay, they will go with a year worth of prevention, and that's something that the group is supporting. One thing that I really wanted to do was get a Friends Up group started when I was there. We already are working with them. It's not an official like MOU at this point. We're working with the county commissioners on getting that approved. So that's something that will come into fruition, because there's some things that as a county with a budget and what we can and cannot do, I respect that and understand that. But when we can't, how do we sort of make it happen so that we can increase our life savings? So, or, shelter intervention. It doesn't just necessarily have to be about life saving. So working with, the organizations that want to support us. And I'm really proud of those organizations. They really do some amazing things. They have helped. So that's sort of my experience and what we built with domestic animal services, but my background in general, like since I started at the animal sanctuary, pretty much have been in fundraising outside of my grant work. But again, I think some of that just comes naturally through having a good experience when you come into the shelter.
And I did want to say one thing so I don't forget it. When somebody adopts an animal, be sure they know about us, because if they cannot afford treatment once their animal gets hit by a car or has any number of things, they can contact us so that animal does not get surrendered back to you.
Yes.
And I know when there wasn't a vet rather at the shelter, they would reach out to us. So just know that
That's amazing.
We're something that you can contact.
And that's one of the ways we work with. We just had a dog that had bladder stones adopted from us 2 weeks ago, needs a surgery, and that group is going to pay for it elsewhere. So
you
that
reach out to us for that.
Those are amazing partnerships.
I would just say I think transparency is really important. I think this community is desperate for positivity and seeing accountability happen, and see, I like that process and policy and being able to have a clear understanding of what people on staff are doing and what you need from the community. I love that you would meet with partners. The door is open at Catnip. We would love to continue to have a good relationship. We can't do it by ourselves.
Right.
Catnip does about 9,000 spay and neuters, and we love to be able to support our shelter and have this community be a safe place for animals. And I like all that.
Well said.
Community partnerships are huge. That's probably going to be my top. Second, you talked about volunteers, a robust volunteer program that, for all the things you mentioned before, it's not just expanding the budget of the county by not having additional, we'll talk to some of those things, but they are representatives of the shelter in the community. So if they have great things to say about the shelter, they're representing the shelter in a great way too. Mm-hmm. And then one thing we have talked about is spay neuter, community spay neuter, something I just want to mention before we leave.
Yeah, we all need more of that.
Okay.
Okay.
Well,
If you don't have questions for us, then I'm not in charge, but it's public comment again.
yeah. Chris, would you like a public comment? Okay, hang on, let me get my timer.
And thank you.
Yes, no, thank you for your time today.
Hearing what you're
Appreciate
saying.
it.
I don't take them anymore.
Okay,
No.
go ahead, Chris.
Okay. Meredith, my name's Chris Deutsch, and just in the back of your head. I've been a volunteer since
Okay, great.
2019. And I'd like to kind of say what everyone else has been saying about public transparency has been very, very bad recently. There's a core group of volunteers that have been looking into things that we thought weren't transparent. I think we've gotten a bad rep for it, but we brought it before the commission, and we're trying to get more on a path of where are the animals going. We've just known where animals were going because we worked with the animal and wanted to know where they're going, and that didn't happen. It was almost like it was a mystery, or we weren't allowed to find out. And come to find out, it was a service that was being paid to take animals, and I think we were all aware of the Miranda Rescue and Sanctuary out in California, that 600 collars were found in a barn, and 117 animal bodies were found chipped, that the guys were taking pictures of them and going off to their new home, and then they were laying in the ground. So, I mean, I'm not saying that's what happened here, but it was very, it provided a lot of unease for volunteers to have confidence in what was happening to basically our animals. Every animal in that shelter belongs to the county, the community. So we were trying to get information, and it seemed like we were being thwarted. So things are still not great with that, and that would be something that it would be really nice to make sure that there was a lot of that. Another question or thing that you were talking about the live release rate, and I think we get really caught up in those numbers. Is that really the most important thing, or the outcome of the animal? I mean, personally, if it was 80%, but we were being really great to the animals, then being dignified and their outcome was better than whatever you also might do with them. How do you feel about that? You don't have to answer me now, because I think at the end, at the end you do get the answer. Some people get the answer. So that's a question for you. And the capacity at the shelter is like a constant thing. And I liked hearing what you said about fosters. If we could get a much more robust foster situation, I think that would help a lot. I know that, like you said, dogs that go out into foster are much more easily adopted, especially that great event we had. That was such a brilliant idea. Whoever said that before, like a week before the event, there was a call for, hey, can anybody take a dog for a week before the adoption event? And I thought, man, that is the smartest darn thing, because how they decompress and they become real, like they show
That's
their
3
true,
minutes,
their
Chris.
true selves, I should say. And you can tell I'm not a great public speaker. I try hard, but thank you for coming and giving us and allowing the rest of us to come in. Thank you.
Do we have response to public comment?
And we hear you.
Yeah. I would like to know how you feel about the question of what's more important, the number or the quality?
Sure. I mean, I always start with, if we're just talking about no-kill, I think the no-kill movement was created when we needed it, right? Like, we were euthanizing animals for reasons that we didn't need to. I think I think we need to move away from that word. For me, the numbers matter. Like, I threw them at you because I'm proud of the numbers that we achieved, but I'm not in it for the percentages. I'm in it for the life-saving. And what does that life-saving look like? We can talk about a shelter that has 15 kennels. Are you going to keep 30 dogs if you've got 15 kennels? No, because you're not going to be able to ever provide those animals the quality of life that they deserve. I mean, sheltering is never perfect. And we want to be able to provide the best care that we can. I think it's a couple things. I think they matter, but I won't let animal welfare get in the way just to achieve a number. Because I think really when it boils down to what we all want here, one, we don't want animals in a shelter, but if they are going to be in the shelter, that they are getting the care that they deserve. And sadly, sometimes euthanasia is part of that process. But for me, I always advocate, and you will hear me say this, that humane euthanasia is an outcome, and that is humane. There are worser fate for these animals, and none of us got in this industry because we want to do that. But it is part of pathway planning. But for me, to what I said earlier, it's really getting ahead of, let's not get to that point, but also we do have a budget with the staff that we have, and we're not just going to get 100 more staff members tomorrow. So in that strategic planning stage and what we need to be looking at and moving forward, what is truly our capacity for care? And I push the limits every day where I work now, and I can see the difference from staff and things. The animals are still very well cared for, but when we get to that brink, you could potentially see that slide back. So it's more about life-saving versus the actual numbers for me.
Okay. If there's nothing else, thank you for coming.
Yes, of course. Thank you for your
Very
time.
nice.
Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Appreciate it.
We're gonna stay and.
Oh, I get to go now.
You get to go now.
Great. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Okay. And do I need to check with anybody on my way out?
No,
Great.
if you have receipts or things for Becky,
Oh, okay.
or she can tell you about reimbursements.
Meredith, thank you. Thank you, thank you.
Okay, everyone, thank you. We have a few minutes now, and so.
Let me in.
Oh, sorry. The magic portal. Yes, the magic portal. Here you go.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, so what we want to just hear from you all is just your feedback on Meredith, her answers, and what do you think about this candidate?
Want to start? Get to start. So I looked at her resume and I was a little cautious looking at her resume because she's only been 2 years but hearing from her, and I did a lot of reading of Naples and the situation, and I saw that it really mirrored Alachua County. Just, there's some things that were different, but I was really impressed. She answered a lot of questions I had before I asked them because she's addressed a lot of needs that the shelter had there, and she recognized all the areas that I had questions about, and I was really impressed with both the experience she shared and the knowledge that she has about running a shelter, and her energy. She had a lot of energy.
Good point. Good point.
Yes.
Okay.
Also, looking at her resume, I wasn't sure until I heard her speak. I was very impressed. Again, sheltering, this is not my area of expertise, but my area of expertise is dealing with people. That's what I teach when I'm not working with my nonprofit. And her points about listening, getting involved, learning. My perspective has always been if someone comes in and when I ask, what are you going to do the first 100 days? Well, I'm going to do this, this, this. She didn't say that. She said, I'm going to learn. I'm going to be aware of what's going on, which I gave her brownie points for. So I thought she seems knowledgeable, interested in what it takes to bring the staff to build morale. I loved your question on morale. How do you do it? You don't do it with pizza parties, although pizza parties aren't bad, but how you listen to people, how you understand, how you create the purpose, and all of those things it sounds like she has the ability to do, how she works with volunteers, making volunteers want to be there, bringing in more people, the awareness of the community, what it's going to be like. Again, how do we bring the community in a more positive perspective? All of these things, the nuts and bolts that you all know much better than me, from what I understood, sounded like she knew what she was doing. But from the areas that I understand, it sounds like she's got energy, heart, passion, ability, willingness to learn, willingness to say she doesn't know or make a mistake, therefore being transparent. And from my perspective, I would certainly want to bring her in.
I really liked what she said about all the things she brought to, in terms of introductions of programs, food pantry, mobile vet, temporary boarding, spay neuter. All of those things are incredible. I would love to see things like that happen here. I also believe that animal welfare doesn't happen in a silo and that we have to work together, and giving organizations that have their strengths the space to do them and utilize them appropriately is a huge thing. If you just say, no, we can do that ourselves, it's not going to have the kind of effects that you want to have when you can lean on others. And this is a very, if my organization needs something, I don't call the front desk at the Humane Society. I contact someone, who I know, and then when I don't know somebody at that organization, I who do I talk to? Who's in charge? What's happening? So I think that I really like her priority of partnership. I really like the idea of transports, as long as it's not Zootrack. But I can get behind that. Being able to work with getting animals out. And I like what she said about stop the flow of animals coming in. We can't forget that. We have to remember that spay neuter and these shelter intervention programs are really great, really important. I like the idea of how she's going to lead, like Jennifer says, is getting in there and talking to people and holding them accountable and saying, you know, there's people in there who are wearing a lot of hats and doing multiple jobs and not doing them to the best of their ability just because they're stretched so thin. So being able to separate out and really fill the staffing voids with, you know, we've lost some really great people and have less people trying to do multiple people's jobs. So being able to get good people in, and the people who are there, holding them accountable by giving them clear instructions and creating good pathways and policies for how to do everything. So I am supportive of this candidate.
Great, thank you.
I agree with everything everybody said. Basically, I think her management style and her values align a lot with how I run my organization, and I think we'll probably get along pretty well and work pretty good together. So I am definitely support this.
All right, great. All right. Well, we will pass this along to the county manager who has interviewed her earlier today, and so we will let you all know when a decision is made, which hopefully is very soon. For everyone's benefit.
Okay.
Yeah.
And do you all know Diane? I didn't.
Yes.
Everyone knows Diane, right?
Chelsea, Melissa.
Okay, good.
I don't know you
You
now.
and I have not met.
No.
And you're,
My name's Jennifer Webb.
Jennifer.
I'm with Shakespeare Animal Fund.
Do you have brochures at our shelter?
I have offered to, I don't know whether they're or not.
Do you know, May?
But I
Because-
know that I spoke to somebody there who said he would make sure that when people adopted or when people had questions, could I bring this animal back because it's got this issue, that he would reference. But you know, every single person I would love
Your
to.
brochures went into every adoption package.
I would love to have that.
I think that may already be happening. I don't know if we have the physical brochures, but I think you may already be in our adoption packet.
Do you have brochures?
Brochure would be wonderful. How are we doing it in our adoption package?
It's all digital.
It's all,
It's digital.
oh, so we don't hand people a package like we did at the event?
No.
What about old people?
What are you trying to say?
You're not there yet.
Well,
Okay.
I do think though, just a stand with the brochure,
Sure.
with our brochure, so I will bring that out because I don't think we've got that. And again, it's just a reminder because people might surrender the animal or do something else, God forbid, if they can't afford treatment, and that's why we're here. Okay.
Okay. But we're sending them home with food.
Yes, they get a bag of starter food, but they don't generally get documentation. If it is somebody that is does not have the ability to receive it electronically, we can print out a physical copy of the records, but generally everything is done electronically.
All right.
But I agree. I'm the older person that likes physically
I
handling
know.
stuff.
We're happy to print out whatever someone needs, just for the most part right
I
now.
do
it's
too, but
electronic.
also you lose some of that stuff. We do have
Need
email
both.
access, like, okay, I can search the bar. I like both.
All right.
Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Adjourn. I motion to adjourn.
Second.
Adjourned.
All right, 15, thank you.
Thank you. Chelsea, do you guys give it,
Good job.
are you digital? I'm stuck on
Okay,
this.
so partially, yes, we do, but we also send like a little, we print the medical record.